I'm 80 years old now. I used to think that sounded ancient. Now it just sounds tired. The doctor doesn't say much anymore. He looks at me the way mechanics look at old engines. Respectful, but aware that parts aren't made for this model anymore. I wake up earlier than I want to. My body decides when the day begins. Sometimes it's 4:30 in the morning, and I lie there in the quiet, listening to the house settle, wondering how many more mornings I'll get to hear it breathe. At 75, I thought I understood life. I'd buried friends, retired from a long career, watched my grandchildren start school. I believed I'd already gathered the lessons. I even told a few people you couldn't pay me to be young again. I said it with confidence. I was wrong. The last 5 years have taught me more than the previous 75 ever did. And not in a loud way, in a stripping way, in a way that removes illusions instead of adding wisdom. When I was in my 20s, I believed time was generous. It stretched out in front of me like an open highway. I married at 26. She was 24. We didn't have much money, but we had energy. We talked about the future like it was a guarantee. We said things like, once things settle down, or when the kids are older, or after this next promotion. I started working long hours almost immediately. It wasn't greed, it was responsibility. That's what I told myself. A man provides, a man builds something solid. I wanted her to feel secure. I wanted my children to never worry about bills the way I saw my father worry. So I stayed late. I said yes to overtime. I missed a few dinners, then more than a few. At first it felt temporary. I remember one night coming home after 10 p.m. The kids were already asleep. My wife had left my plate in the oven covered in foil. There was a note beside it. We saved you some cake. Tommy lost his first tooth tonight. I read that note 3 times. I told myself I'd be there for the next one. There's always a next one when you're 32. In my 30s, I was climbing. Promotions came slowly, but they came. People respected me. They asked my opinion in meetings. I liked that feeling more than I should admit. It felt like proof that I mattered. At home, the kids grew taller without asking my permission. I started noticing changes all at once instead of gradually. One day, my daughter was asking me to read to her. Then suddenly, she was closing her bedroom door and talking to friends on the phone. I thought I was present because I lived in the house. But being in the house isn't the same as being in the moment. My wife would sometimes sit across from me at dinner and say, "You're quiet." I'd tell her I was just tired, and I was, but I was also elsewhere, thinking about deadlines, thinking about next quarter, thinking about how to stay ahead. I told myself it was all for them. In my 40s, the house was full, but somehow already quieter. The kids were busy with their own lives, sports, school, friends. I drove them places, paid for things, showed up at the big events when I could. I convinced myself that the big events were what counted. I didn't notice the small moments slipping through my fingers, the ordinary Tuesdays, the bored car rides, the random questions asked from the back seat. Those were the real ones. At 47, my father died. He was 72. I remember standing by his hospital bed staring at the machines. He had always seemed indestructible to me. Even in his 60s, he moved with purpose. He fixed things around his house. He told stories about his youth like they had happened last week, and then he was gone. At his funeral, I had a strange thought. I realized I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. I knew his routines, his temper, his work history, but I didn't know what kept him awake at night. I didn't know what he regretted. We had always assumed there would be more time for those conversations. There wasn't. That should have been my wake-up call. It wasn't. I went back to work the following Monday. I told myself that's what he would have done, and maybe it was, but I never stopped to ask whether that was the right inheritance to carry forward. In my 50s, success finally arrived in the way I'd always imagined: bigger house, better car, a title on my office door, people introducing me at events with a certain tone in their voice. I stood in my kitchen one evening looking at the granite countertops we'd upgraded to and felt something I couldn't name. It wasn't pride, it wasn't joy, it was emptiness. The kids were both out of the house by then. College, jobs, relationships. They visited on holidays. We took photos around the table. Everyone smiled. But I sensed a distance I couldn't close. They were polite, loving even, but there were stories they told each other that I wasn't part of, memories that didn't include me. That's when I first felt the cost, not a dramatic cost. No explosions, no one yelling, just absence. My wife and I had more time alone together again. You'd think that would have been sweet. In some ways it was. But we had grown in different directions without noticing. For years, our conversations had revolved around logistics. Now we were face to face without a script. We did our best. We were kind to each other, but there were whole seasons of our lives we had never truly shared because I had been chasing something outside the front door. At 68, I retired. The party at the office was nice, speeches, a plaque, handshakes. I drove home that afternoon with a box of framed certificates on the passenger seat. The next morning, no one needed me. That was harder than I expected. For decades, my worth had been measured in output, in results, in how many problems I could solve. Suddenly the phone was quiet. The calendar was empty. I thought I'd enjoy the freedom, and sometimes I did, but underneath it was a question I couldn't shake. Who am I if I'm not busy? Around 75, my wife started slowing down. Nothing dramatic at first, just small complaints, a little more fatigue, a little more pain. We both assumed it was age. That's what you do when you reach your 70s. You normalize decline. By the time we realized it was something serious, it was already moving fast. I sat beside her hospital bed many nights, the same way I had sat beside my father's. The machines, the quiet beeping, the smell of disinfectant. One evening she looked at me and said, "We were always going to travel more." I nodded. I said, "We still can." We both knew that wasn't true. She died 6 months later. We had been married 49 years. The house has been too big ever since. That's when the last 5 years began teaching me what 75 hadn't. Grief has a way of removing distractions. There's no one left to impress, no ladder left to climb, just silence and memory. I walk through rooms and see versions of us at different ages. I remember the night she left that note about our son's tooth. I remember brushing past her in the kitchen because I was late. I remember thinking, I'll make it up to her when things slow down. Things always slow down, just not when you expect. I don't regret working, I don't regret providing, but I regret believing that presents could be postponed. I regret assuming there would be a better season to sit still, a better season to listen longer, a better season to ask deeper questions. Time doesn't announce its departures. It just leaves. At 80, the lessons are simple, but they came at a price. Success feels smaller in an empty house. Money doesn't sit at the dinner table. Productivity doesn't hold your hand in a hospital room. And the people you love don't need your excellence nearly as much as they need your attention. I used to think regret came from failure, from bad decisions, from reckless mistakes. But most of my regret came from reasonable choices made too often, from saying, "Not tonight," from saying, "After this project," from saying, "There will be time." There wasn't as much as I thought. If you're younger and listening to an old man ramble, I won't tell you to quit your job or abandon your ambitions. Life is complicated. Responsibilities are real, but I will tell you this. Look up more often. Sit at the table a little longer. Let the story finish, even if you've heard it before. The promotions fade faster than you think. The titles get forgotten, but the missed moments, they echo. I live with echoes now. Some mornings I sit by the window with my coffee and watch the light come up. I think about the man I was at 30. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't selfish. He was trying to build something solid. I just wish he had understood that the foundation wasn't outside the house. It was inside. At 80, I don't have grand revelations left. Just small, steady truths. Love doesn't wait. Children grow even if you're not looking. Spouses age even if you're busy. And one day you wake up in a quiet house and all the things you meant to do have turned into things you can only remember. I'm not angry at my life. I'm grateful for much of it. I had a good career, healthy children. nearly 5 decades with a woman who loved me even when I was distracted. But if I could speak to the younger version of myself, I wouldn't tell him to work harder. I'd tell him to come home earlier, to sit on the floor and play, to hold her hand without checking the clock. You won't want to miss this lesson, not because it's dramatic, but because it's quiet, and quiet things are easy to overlook. If any of this sounds familiar, maybe just pause tonight. That's all. Pause. I'm 80. I can feel the narrowing of days. It doesn't frighten me the way it once might have. It just makes everything clearer. In the end, it wasn't the big decisions that shaped my loneliness. It was the small delays, and that's what 75 years and then 5 more finally taught me.